Good morning, everybody. How are you? It is Vicky Powell, the Retail Business Queen, talking to you today in this webinar about the impact of coronavirus. This little virus has started to gather a lot of momentum over the past couple of weeks and months, certainly since Christmas. I work a lot with China. I have a lot of suppliers in China. I've worked with China for a long, long time. So I've got some friends there. I have got suppliers there who are also good friends. And come to realise really that aside from my own stock getting stuck in not being going into production and being delayed in terms of shipping, that really the longer this sort of pandemic, I suppose, almost it's been called, goes on, the more impact it will have on on everything really. And in terms of the retail industry, you may not think that it's going to have an effect on you or your stock or your little business, but the truth is it will. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm just going to check that I am streaming in the right place. I am doing this webinar in, come on, am I streaming? Yep. Doing this webinar in this group because for some reason nobody seemed to have understood the instructions of joining. I set up a specific Facebook group for everyone to discuss this webinar and to discuss ask me questions, and I don't know whether people didn't get the links or what happened really. So that's why I decided to broadcast it here. And if you did sign up for it, you will be watching this as a replay. I do have a few people watching. So if you've got any questions, then do pop them in the comments and I will try and cover them. So I'm going to share my screen now that I have learned how to do this. Show in stream. There we go. I'm going to make myself smaller so you can see me, and I'm going to flip on to my PowerPoint. So as I say, that's what we're going to cover. We are going to talk about the current situation. I'm going to tell you a bit from my experience what is happening with some of my stock from my retail business, what I'm hearing from suppliers and factory owners. Then we're going to talk about the types of products at risk. I'm going to talk about the supply chain structure. And this is where you may understand how it will impact you. You may think, well, I'm not dealing directly with China, so what difference does it make to me? But it does, because if you're not buying directly from China, I almost guarantee that your suppliers will be buying from China, so it will have an effect on you. May only affect you a little bit later than it is affecting people buying directly from China, but it will have an effect. Also talking about what the big retailers are doing. I've got lots of contacts still in the retail giants, multiple retail, lots of contacts in suppliers, and they are telling me what the big retailers are doing. So giving you a heads up on that. And then what can we do as little independent retailers, as sole traders or owners of one shop, two shops, working from home, whatever we are doing. But what can we do? And then we are going to summarize it all. So I will keep flipping back to the Facebook group and just double check to see any comments. So the current situation. So this is a timeline of what normally happens. The yellow part is what normally happens. So Chinese New Year moves around, something a bit like Easter and things. It must be something to do with calendars and I don't know, but it changes. It usually happens sometime between the third week in January and can actually happen as late as the end of February for Chinese New Year. This year it was on the 25th of January. So what normally happens is, to them, they, contrary to popular belief, China does have quite a lot of little holidays and sort of the equivalent to bank holidays, and the workers do actually get this time off. They don't tend to be given 4 weeks holiday like we get, 25 days or whatever, if you were working for a company. They always have Chinese New Year off, and they do tend to have all of these national holidays off. Other than that, they don't really get any other time off, so they're all off at the same time. So in terms of when the coronavirus has struck, it actually couldn't have happened at a better time, because the government knew that all of the workers had all gone back home. They weren't in the factories. The difficult part was that when it was really starting, the awareness of it started to come about, was actually the same weekend as when like 1 billion people were traveling all over China. So that was the downside. But once they'd all gone back home, the government could keep them sort of in lockdown, really. So under normal circumstances, this was the timeline that I was working to. So around the 17th, the factories close, the workers leave to go home for the holiday. Now, the workers, so these are production workers, people who were painting things, making things, operating machinery, plus account managers, admin, that kind of stuff. And they very often work hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from home. And this is because they will work wherever pays them best, what suits their skills. Often if their friend or their uncle or cousin works in a particular factory, they will get them a job when they turn 18 or 21 or whatever. And so they often don't work anywhere near to their home, and they send their money back to their families, to parents and grandparents. Often the children stay with parents and grandparents. So Chinese New Year holiday is a time when they all return home, no matter how far away that is or how long it takes them, but they all return home. So that's why the factory workers tend to finish a little bit early. It gives them a good few days to get home. And believe me, I'm going to show you a map in a minute, but that it can take them days to get home. It's got a little bit better now. The transport system is better, but 10, 20 years ago, it did used to take some of them 2 to 3 days to get home. The admin staff tend to finish a little bit later. So there's usually people managing emails and responding to queries and things. They tend to finish a little bit before. And then everybody is off from the 23rd for sort of a week to 10 days. So Monday the 3rd, we all expected the factories to reopen and the admin staff to come back and the workers to start coming back. And then usually a week later, normal production resumes. So they would have had a good week off at home and then start to come back home. It obviously depends on the factory owners, the distances, that kind of thing. So from week commencing the 10th of February, which was 2 weeks ago, we would have expected normal production to have resumed. What has happened is the first part happened, factories closed. So that weekend of the 17th, 18th was the weekend that there was like 1 billion people. You would have seen pictures on the news of, just loads and loads of people everywhere. And that is where the virus has spread, because there were so many people at train stations, at bus stations, ferry terminals, all waiting to try and get home. So they've all got home, they've all celebrated Chinese New Year, and then the Chinese government has told them to stay at home for between 7 and 14 days while they try and get control on the spread of it. And that's what they were told, and we didn't really hear anything for a good week or so. Then around the time when they should have gone back to work on the 10th, the factory owners were all told that they would need to apply for a license. Some of the workers were still in lockdown. Nobody in China has been allowed to congregate in public places. You've had like the Great Wall has been closed down, the museums have been closed, cinemas, things like that have all been closed to stop people from gathering together. If one person has got the virus, if they are all meeting in a public place, there is a chance of it spreading. They've all literally been told to stay at home. So the factory owners a couple of weeks ago were told they'd all need to apply for a license to trade, and this would be a license that would permit them, but they had to specify what kind of working conditions they would implement, where their workers were, if they had any workers that lived in Wuhan, they have told them to stay, stay put. That nobody's been allowed out of Wuhan still. So the factory owners have had to put in some guidelines, have had to look at things like disinfectant and antibacterial stuff, about screening, and limit the number of workers that are working on particular production lines. So what you would have found, certainly in a lot of the factories that I've visited, you would have found long production lines of 20, 30, 40 workers all doing the same thing, or all in a big open plan factory, and it would be the whole process. So it would be something like, let's say, a mug. So the mug would be made in a mold, then it would go into the kilns, then it would come out, then it would go to cooling, then it would go to painting, then it would go to somebody else who would put on the metallic, then it would go to QC, then it would go to packing, and it could be in the same room. And what the government have now stipulated is that there's to be no more than sort of groups of 6 to 8 people, and then they are to be separated and not integrate with the next batch of people along. And it's to stop the spread, but also they are protecting their own workforce and production, because if somebody has the virus in that little pod, it would only affect, and they would only need to quarantine sort of 6 to 8 people and not the whole factory. So they've done it to look after themselves, but at the same time, at least it means that there are processes starting to be put in place to start production. So this week, I've just spoken to one of my factories this morning. They said they are 70% resumed. Still got some factories that are waiting for approval on the license. Some factories that can't, that have only had 40% of their workers come back. So although they are effectively 100% up and running, they've only got 40% of the workforce. So that is the current situation. So it really means that it's still a little bit unknown. We are at least, I would say, 3 weeks behind in terms of production. But up to now, nothing has gone into production that I'm aware of. No finished goods are ready for any clients, any customers, any retailers. So by the time they are fully up and running, I suspect that we will still have another 2 weeks or so before goods are starting to leave China, and it would still be a much reduced quantity of goods, simply because of the workers who haven't come back to factories at the moment. So that is the current timeline. I'm just going to go back. Oops, where am I? There I am. Right, so we see, do we need to think about Christmas now? Christmas, as a large retailer, I've always bought Christmas, as you know. I would have placed my orders by now. So the large retailers will be panicking a little bit about Christmas, because some of the product would certainly already be in production, and certainly products that are being made in massive volume. They need to start making it and getting it ready for shipment. And some of my shipments would have started in May. So you can see that the bigger retailers will be thinking about Christmas, and the bigger importers. And what is going to happen is it will be a case of whoever screams and shouts the loudest will get the goods quickest. But what could happen is some Christmas stuff, they put pressure on the factories, and some of the Christmas stuff gets made first. But then what will happen in a few weeks is there will be a bottleneck really at the ports. So there will be very little control over what gets on vessels. So the answer really is yes, you should start to think about autumn winter, as well as whether your spring summer stock, if you're still waiting on stock, whether your spring summer stock will come in. Right, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Where are we? There we go. So here we go. Just to put some, let me just check I'm okay. Can you still see me okay? I think you can. Yes. So, oh, I'm on the right screen. Oh my gosh, right, that's amazing. Can you still see me okay? Helen saying, do you need to think about Christmas just so we can see who that was? Right. So this, just to give you an idea. So China is huge. The area in green, this little circle here, this is where most of the trade of general products comes from. I have spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, visited factories in this kind of area, been to Taiwan as well. The furthest north I've been really is Shanghai. I've got a lot of factories around this area. So although I hop over the border from Hong Kong to China, it's still pretty southern China. Wuhan is a little bit further north, still not way up north. So that's why really Beijing is not massively been affected at the moment. But in terms of products, general products, a lot of them are in this southern section of China, which is why it's had a massive effect on us because of Wuhan. But just to give you an idea, a lot of the factories are located here. It's too expensive for them to live, and for all their families to live in this southern section of China, because you do get a lot of wealthy people, because it's so close to Hong Kong and Macau. So they, like to live here where properties are cheaper. There's a lot of land, but they like the convenience of being very close to Hong Kong. So they'll go to Hong Kong for the day, and they'll go to Macau for the day, which is sort of like Vegas of China. Shanghai is a very rich city as well. So the general workers cannot afford to live, and their families to live in this area. So often they will live over here. I don't know if you can see my little whizzer whizzing round, but they will live up here, sort of heading towards Beijing. They'll go across here. And just to give you some perspective, it's about 1,200 miles from Guangzhou, which is down here, which is where the Canton Fair is, up to Beijing. Now, there is a bullet train, which is sort of your equivalent of your Pendolinos, the Virgin London to Manchester trains, which you can get to London, from London to Manchester in 2 hours. So they can go on the bullet trains in 8 to 11 hours. Now that is quite expensive for them. So what they tend to do is to either, if they live if their factory is on the coast, they will get the ferry and come up this way and possibly go across, or they will get a general train, so not a high-speed train, which is about 24 hours. That's 24 hours without any connections, but giving connections and things. So this is why it can take them sort of 2 days to get home, and obviously the same coming back. So this was give you an idea of where Wuhan is, sort of in the center, and that is why when we're working with these factories in the sort of southeast coast, that they are more affected because of the Wuhan outbreak. This is to give you an idea of a shipping line. So this is Maersk, which is the world's biggest shipper, freight forwarder. This is one of the super tankers. Now, generally, in terms of goods coming out of China, if it's going up by sea, we have 20-foot containers, and the 40-foot. So your 20-foot. I'm just looking to see if you can see. You can't really see on that picture which ones they are, but 20-foot, 40-foot, and the 40-foot high cube is generally what we ship goods on. There's not a lot of the 45 high cube containers. Although that's a better picture. So there's super tankers. So Maersk built these super tankers about 5 years ago. Each one can hold 18,300 containers. So that is a lot. But just to give you a perspective, it's cancelled 50 sailings to and from Asia in the last 3 weeks. I'm not sure what that is as a percentage. I would probably say about 25% of the weekly sailings. So it just shows that there's not a lot of stuff coming out. You've also got empty tankers coming back from UK and Europe with empty containers on. They can't get into the ports at the moment because of there's just no room. So they are all on the water, sort of, just anchored away a few miles away from the ports. But that is what I mean about potentially a backlog of getting these empty containers in so that they can get out to the factories and get filled, but also for shipping for vessels to go out as well. So just to give you an idea, so when I've bought goods, when I've worked at Home Bargains and Matalan and Pound Stretcher, I always bought in full container loads. 40-foot container will hold about 80,000 t-shirts, these are all, not and, 60,000 coffee mugs, about 500,000 pens, 17 boxes of A4 paper. So the ones where you get your 5 reams in there. About 25,000 pairs of trainers in boxes, 8,000 Christmas trees, and 3,000 nests of suitcases. So generally you pack them where you do a large one, then you put smaller ones inside just to make use of the freight. So that's a lot of goods that haven't gone out from China in the last 3 weeks. Bit of statistics on what kind of imports we've got. So to the UK, we're importing about 45 billion pounds worth of goods. So don't forget that will be at factory prices. So in terms of retail, you're probably looking at that being easily 100 billion. And that was in 2018. What's the others? So China exports have risen. So you can see on the far right, so between 1999 and 2018, the exports from the imports into China, look at that top line, how much it's escalated. So as I say, we are heading towards the 50 billion pounds, but in 1999 that was maybe about 3 billion. So that's grown massively for lots of reasons. Lots of things happened to trade relationships with China, things like duty rates, the number of vessels and sailings to the UK increased. The market just opened up really. They took a lot of blocks off some products that were being that was limited in terms of what could be exported from China. That opened up. We've obviously got the electronics markets, that adds a lot. Car industry, that has added into those figures as well. It's not just sort of general stuff that we sell in our stores. There you go. You can see the figures there. So 1999, we imported 4.2 billion. And now we are importing 44.7. That was in 2018. The biggest percentage of goods in terms of monetary value, telecoms and sound recording, miscellaneous, which a lot of our stuff comes into, is 4.9 billion. What else have we got? Clothing is 3.8. So there is a lot of stock coming from China. So the types of products that are at risk, we've got the car industry. You would have seen that in the news about certainly Land Rover. Think they are going to struggle in terms of waiting for car parts. Technology, so we've got our Apple iPhones could impact a delay with a new product launch of technology. We've got fashion, so a lot of high summer stock. So a lot of spring stock would have been on the water before Chinese New Year, but high summer stock, certainly things like beach towels, suitcases, bikinis, a lot of those kind of things would probably be expected to be on the water now. Homeware is coming out of China all the time. Toys, garden furniture, swings, trampolines, things like that, summer stuff. Beauty products come from China a lot. So you've got, a lot of stuff to do with the nails, lotions, potions, creams, that kind of stuff coming from China. And then we've got Halloween and Christmas, which are at risk if this continues. And we do have food. Some food comes from China as well. So let's talk a little bit. Let me just check. Let me just whiz back and check in case I've got any more comments. Okay, right. So supply chain. So you may be thinking, I don't buy from China, so it doesn't affect my business. Possibly not, but your suppliers do buy from China. So from left to right, we've got a China manufacturer. We've got lots of major retailers will buy directly from the China manufacturer or using an agent. Some may also use an importer. You do have your big importers, and there are a lot of them. You'd be very surprised when you walk around the trade shows. Certainly the NEC, the Spring Fair we've just had, certainly the suppliers with the bigger stands, they will all be buying directly from China. You've got homewares, you've got furniture, you have got toys, Christmas people, greeting cards. As I say, so many large importers. Usually the ones with the bigger stands are the ones buying directly from China. If they're not importing it directly, and you've got your large wholesalers, often they will buy from the bigger importers, so it will have a knock-on effect on them. Then you've got your smaller wholesalers and your cash and carries. So you've got your cash and carries like Booker's, Makro, Costco even, your smaller wholesalers. So you've got people with showrooms where you can walk in and you can pop stuff in your, like country baskets, you can pop stuff in your trolley. They will be buying probably from your larger wholesalers, if not your bigger importers. So as the supply chain starts to get affected, so China production is slowed, has not happened, which will have an effect on your importers. Then there is no stock for them to supply to your larger wholesalers, and there's no stock for them to supply for your smaller wholesalers, and there's none for you to supply to your cash and carries. So that whole supply chain, and obviously you've got us as independent retailers, where are we buying from? So it will have a knock-on effect. Any delay at the top end of the product tree will have a massive impact on each of those. So at the moment, if you're buying directly from China, we are working to, what did we say, about 4-week delay. Now, as you get further down that supply chain, you've got 4-week delay, but it really depends how big a customer they are to their supplier, and whether they then have to wait for delivery or whether they process the orders to them quickly, and that could add another week, 2 weeks on. So that's just based at the moment, that's currently. If these factories don't go back to work and they're not up to full production within the next few weeks, it will, you're looking at a 2 to 3 month delay on the supply of goods coming from China. We've all got different types of suppliers. What do they look like? You may never meet them. They could be suited and booted. They could just be somebody who you know by email. They could be somebody with a nice friendly face, like that lady on the left. They come in all shapes and sizes, and they are all going to have to deal with this issue. So types of businesses in those supply chains. We've got manufacturers, craft businesses, or even manufacturers and creatives. Although if they are small craft businesses based in the UK or Europe, they will still have raw materials unless they are making something from scraps or wood that they are picking up from a forest or whatever. They will have some sorts of raw materials. It could be clasps on jewelry, it could be bindings on books, it could be lids on boxes, whatever. So you've got your manufacturers, then you've got your importers, they're buying in bulk from the factories, you've got your wholesalers, and then, as I say, you've got your cash and carries, and it will affect all of us. So on to the big retailers, and what are they doing? I'm just going to check my comments. Are we all okay so far? Making sense? hopefully not worrying you too much, but forearmed is forewarned. So that's my motto. Right, big retailers, what are they doing? So this is from chatting to a few contacts that I've got, people who are used to work for me, or they were ex-colleagues, whatever. They are still in big retail, in sourcing and buying. I've also been speaking to a lot of suppliers. So these are importers that are buying from China and supplying into some of the bigger retailers. And, you know, this is just a handful of the bigger retailers who are all buying from China, either directly or indirectly. So, you know, your Tesco's, your Matalans, your Next, your Primark, lots of them have got other options as well. They have got other, they're not just buying from China, they will be buying from the Philippines, Indonesia, India, Europe even. But what they are doing at the moment is they are looking at their supply bases. They are keeping in contact with the factories. And as I said right at the beginning, let me just plug my laptop in. I don't want to run out. There we go. Sorry about that. Don't seem to be. Right, why am I not plugged in? There we go. All plugged in, sorry about that. Right, yes, so at the moment, they are doing two things. They are screaming very loudly with the suppliers, putting the pressure on massively in terms of get my stuff made as soon as your workers are back, put me to the front of the queue, never mind all of your other customers. I am Tesco or I am Matalan. That is exactly what I would have done when I was a buyer. Depends how much how many orders they've got with that factory, how much ongoing business they've got, what the relationship is like, but they will be screaming loudly to try and get their stuff pushed to the front of the queue and out. They will be considering air freighting stock in if they are reaching crisis point in their stores. Now, air freight is so expensive, massively more expensive than sea freight, but the difference is you get the goods in 3 to 4 days rather than 28 to 30 days. So if they are desperate, they will be sea freighting that product in. They may then have to review their retail prices, and what they certainly won't be doing is a lot of discounting, which is always a good thing, although the consumer may kick off a little bit, but we will see a reduction in the amount of discounting because people will be protecting their stock. You don't want to get rid of it to make room for new stock because your new stock is delayed. You want to keep hold of your stock and get the most money for that stock as well. The other thing that they are all doing is doing a big ring around all the UK importers. So these are importers who might have stock on the floor and actually sat in their warehouses. And I know for a fact that certainly 4 of those retailers have already done that, particularly on some product areas, and they have contacted suppliers and tried to scoop up all of their stock that they're holding in the UK. Now, some suppliers have let it go because they need it for cash flow and they've sold it to them. Other suppliers have been a little more clever and are keeping hold of it, because if Tesco comes along and wants a duvet set for £6, actually if they hold out a little longer, it may become a bit of a bidding war and they may be able to sell it for a higher price to another retailer, depending on how desperate they are. So certainly the bigger retailers are doing a lot of screaming and shouting and panicking and just trying to get the products on vessels or on flights out of the factories as quickly as possible. They're also looking at other options in terms of supply base. So if they have got current factories in China, but they've also got some manufacturing in India or Bangladesh or the Philippines, Thailand, Taiwan, they are trying to switch over their production to that. Still going to delay the process because they will still need to go through the sampling process with a different supplier, make sure that they have got all the artwork, that they've got all the size sets, and they've done all the QC work. If we think this crisis might go on longer, that again is something that I would do. So it could mean that buyers are jumping on planes and going out to different countries to take their business, move their business and their production to them. They'll also be looking at Europe as well. Certainly the clothing retailers will be looking at Europe. A lot of clothing comes out of Turkey and Czech Republic. So a lot of them will be heading out over there to see if they can get some of their products made quicker, a little more expensive. So again, that has a knock-on effect on margins and retail prices, but they will be looking at Europe as well. Might be a good thing for UK industry. There are a lot more clothing manufacturers popping up in the UK. So it could be that they can pick up some business. If you are a UK manufacturer, I would certainly be, and you've got capacity, I would absolutely be contacting some of the bigger retailers and making sure people are aware that you can turn stock around quite quickly. And yes, so that is what the big retailers are doing, and I know that for a fact, and they are trying to protect their future business. They will be wary of Christmas. That was a question that was asked earlier, and they certainly will be thinking of autumn winter because they'll be wanting that to be moving quickly. If they've got manufacturers that are making spring summer stock and autumn winter stock, they will be making a decision on whether it's worth bringing that stock in, because the later that stock arrives, the less time they've actually got to sell it. So a lot of the buys as a buyer are based on the number of weeks that you anticipate that stock selling for. So if things are set back, like your stock doesn't get shipped on time, it puts more pressure on you to sell it because you've got less weeks to do so. So if some of the retailers have already lost 4 weeks of sales, they may take a view on whether or not to go ahead with the orders or not. So they will be doing a lot of serious reviewing of the spring summer lines and what their offerings are, and they will also be doing a lot of contingency work on autumn winter as well to protect the stock, make sure the stock comes in on time, and also working quite closely with the factories and also with the big importers. Does that make sense? Does that make you feel better, worse? Are we thinking, oh my goodness, they are getting, ahead of us? If you are thinking, oh my goodness, all these big retailers are coming on board and they are going to scoop up all the stock, not necessarily, because some of those retailers on that slide don't buy in a lot of the massive quantities that you think they do buy in, and actually some of the big retailers will come along and they will command bigger quantities because they've got bigger customer bases, i.e. the wholesalers and the end user and the retailers. So a lot of the bigger wholesalers will actually be a lot more powerful than some of those retailers, depending on what the product is. So what can we do? So as independent retailers, possibly not buying from China, what can we do and how can we protect our stock? So first thing is to review your current stock position. Look at what you have got on your shop floor or in your stock room, your warehouse, whatever it might be. And if you were thinking of doing an offer or discounting it, it's certainly worth reconsidering, just to protect continuity of supply to your customers. It could be that you take some stock off the floor, and you can save it because you might want to relaunch it for the end of April. It could be that you just think, oh, stuff it, I am just going to sell what I can and then grab what I can. Don't get me wrong, your suppliers, your importers are not sat in empty warehouses at the moment. There is stock around, but it will be a case of you may not get the good prices that you did previously, because, as I say, they may just sell stock to the highest bidder. But first thing to do is look at your current stock position. You may not be worried. If you're a maker or a crafter, have a look at some of your components. Are you okay for your components? Do you need to start looking elsewhere? Do you need to contact your supplier and just see what what the supply position is? Check on any stock that you already have ordered. So a lot of you may have gone to Spring Fair. You may even have gone to Autumn Fair last year and be waiting on stock to come in that you ordered at Autumn Fair for Spring Summer. So get in contact with your suppliers and just find out what the current position is on those orders. Try and tell them that you understand the situation with China, but you really want an honest answer. You don't want them kind of dangling the carrot, and you want to know what the facts are. If the stock is late and that those cups that you've ordered and you desperately need are not even on the water yet, you want to know the truth so that you can go away and have a look for an alternative supply. When the stock starts to come in, I want you to make sure that your deliveries aren't compressed. So if you've placed 2 or 3 drops of these mugs, I want you to make sure that your supplier still delivers them in line with the schedule that you would have given them. So if you asked for 200 to be delivered beginning of February, 200 to be delivered beginning of March, and 200 to be delivered beginning of April, and you haven't had your February drop, but it's coming in the middle of February. What I don't want you to do is accept that they can deliver February's and March's together. So that means you've got 400 mugs coming in one go, and you've got another drop coming in April. I want you to review and be brave and go back to your suppliers and say, well, you were late, you didn't deliver the first drop, so I'm going to cancel that one. I only want drops 2 and 3, or I'm going to spread it apart. This is what my reworked order schedule is. You are entitled to do that because the stock has been late, so the supplier has broken the contract. So you are entitled to move your deliveries around. Don't end up with a load of stock that's all bunched up together and being delivered together just because the supplier had the late deliveries and everything's coming together and they want to get it out to you. The supplier will, of course, still want to supply to you and supply what the original quantity was, but you don't need to take it. So certainly have a look and make sure that you keep an eye on your different drops of split orders. Next thing is to look at your supply chain. So if you've always dealt with 2 or 3 different importers, it's time to broaden your horizons, try out some new suppliers, have a look for different types of suppliers, look for UK manufacturers if you can, look for European manufacturers, just to hedge your bets, really, just to protect your continuity of stock. But certainly have a look, and if your current supplier hasn't got any pens in stock, you need to get that little black book out from the Spring Fair, get things like magazines out and have a look through at different suppliers, get on the phone, send some emails off and just have a look. There are hundreds and thousands of suppliers in the UK, from manufacturers to importers to wholesalers, cash and carry. So there's not a shortage of stock. It just may be that the original stock that you wanted, you might not be able to get. So instead of just accepting that you can't get that stock, that means that you won't have the stock in to sell, so which will have an effect on your sales. Go out and find some other suppliers who can give you that stock or similar stock. It may do your business the world of good to bring in some new suppliers, start building up those relationships. And maintain contact with your suppliers, whether they're new suppliers or whether they are existing suppliers, but make sure you have regular contact. Phone is absolutely the best way of getting the right answers. People find it much easier to flex the truth if you are talking to them face to face or on the phone. It's much easier for them to kind of avoid an email or just to give you a bit of a wishy-washy answer by email, because it's quite faceless. So maintain those relationships with suppliers, set up some meetings, invite them in to see you, come to your shop, have a look, what have they got, what can they substitute, and just build up that relationship with them. That is the key to all buyer supplier relationships, is just maintaining that contact, understanding them, making sure they understand you, they know your business, and that they want your business to succeed. Our suppliers don't want to let us down. They hate this situation as much as we do. But if you can get a good working relationship with the supplier, and you get a lot of good communication, and they understand that you might need to cancel that order, or you might need to go and find some mugs from somebody else, that is absolutely fine. They may even have a network of other reps that they know that they can recommend to you. But a good supplier really should have your best interests at heart and really want your business to succeed. And last bit of advice on this is don't rush into discounting stock. So you may need to discount for cash flow, you may need the space, you just might be sick of looking at some stock, but really think carefully. If there are other reasons why you're discounting, just be a little bit more tentative in your decision making, just because you don't want to sell a load of stock and then have problems bringing new stock in. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions on what we are needing to do? I'm just going to check. Don't know what someone's saying. God, I hope not. Was that about Christmas? Missed the beginning after watching catch up. No problem to watching catch up. If you are watching on catch up and you do have any questions, then please message me, because we've not had the specific group up and running because people didn't read the message and join. So if you do have any specific questions, message me through my Facebook page or any of the groups that you're in. Right. So in summary, these are things for you to do. It's review your supplier base, keep in regular contact with your suppliers, and I mean regularly, so not just now and then don't speak to them again for a month. It's if they say to you, we think we're going to get the stock next week, phone them next week. If they say, well, we should have an answer by Friday, and they've not phoned you or emailed you, contact them on Friday. You need to keep on the keep them on the toes, keep chasing them, because there's you and probably 25 other accounts that they've got to manage, and it's whoever shouts the loudest. Review your current stock, so really have a good look at what stock you've got. Believe me, by moving things around in your shop can look like it's got a completely new set of range of stock when it was existing stuff. We used to do that all the time. We'd move things around. We'd put things near to the door to say it was on offer, and then we'd move it into the main aisles, and it would still be the same price. It would just depend where it was located, when it depended how well it quickly and how well it sold. If you've got oddments and it's in a particular colour theme, you can move it over to something else in that particular colour theme, and it all looks like it's part of a coherent range. It always does you good to update your window displays on a weekly, if not fortnightly basis. So you can move stock around with a window display. You can show stuff off in a different way, using a different mannequin or a different type of shelf or table display. So don't think that because you've had that stock a long time that you need to discount it. Have a good look at it. Is it still sellable at full price? Is it still current? Is it still relevant? Is it still merchantable, and just do a little bit of moving things around. If you are going to struggle with some supply issues over the next few weeks and months, then it's good to keep hold of the stock that you have. So, and also be mindful of holding a sale or any offers. Again, if you need to do it for cash flow, that's absolutely fine. But if you're doing it to make room, just be mindful that you might not need to make room just yet. So, yes, lots of things to do. If you need more help, you can book a free 50-minute discovery call. We've got the VIP membership group, and there's one-to-one work with me, one-to-one calls, power hours, and ongoing consultancy support that I offer. Hope this has been useful for you. Hope it's given you an insight into importing from China if you don't already, and to see how lengthy the process is and how much we rely on China as a supply base. Yes, it is having an impact on all of us. It will continue to do so for the next few weeks. So keep looking for any announcements that I put on my Facebook page. And you know where I am if you need to speak to me. Any questions, as I say, pop it in the message me or pop it in the groups and I will cover it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon. Bye for now.